You know that moment when someone looks you dead in the eye and tells you that your biggest dream is nothing more than a joke? Well, I lived through that moment. And honestly, it nearly destroyed me. But here's the thing about being crushed. Sometimes it's exactly what you need to become unbreakable. My name is Jenny, and this is the story of how the person who tried to bury my dreams ended up begging to be part of them. Trust me, you won't believe how this unfolds. Picture this. I'm 22 years old, sitting in my tiny studio apartment that barely fits a bed and a desk, surrounded by sketchbooks, fabric samples, and dreams bigger than my bank account. I had this vision. I wanted to create a sustainable fashion line that would revolutionize how people think about clothing. I'm talking about pieces that would last forever, made from materials that wouldn't hurt our planet, designed with such care that every stitch told a story. I remember the exact moment I knew this was my calling. I was walking through a thrift store downtown, running my fingers along a vintage blazer from the 1940s. The fabric was still pristine, the tailoring immaculate. It had survived 80 years and looked better than most things hanging in department stores today. That's when it hit me. Fashion used to be about quality, about creating something that would last. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. So there I was, sketching until 3 a.m. every night, researching sustainable materials during my lunch breaks at my soul-crushing receptionist job, and dreaming of the day I could quit and focus on building something meaningful. My savings account was laughable, maybe $800 on a good month. But my determination? That was bulletproof. Or so I thought. The first person I shared my dream with was Marcus. God, even saying his name now makes my chest tight. But back then, Marcus was everything to me. We'd been dating for 2 years, and I genuinely believed he was the person I'd spend my life with. He was charming, successful, worked in finance, made good money, drove a nice car, all the things that, at 22, I thought mattered. I'll never forget the night I finally worked up the courage to tell him about my business idea. We were at his apartment, this sleek, modern place that always made me feel a little out of place with its stark white walls and expensive furniture that looked like it came straight from a magazine. I was so nervous, my hands were actually shaking as I pulled out my sketches. "Marcus," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I want to show you something I've been working on." He looked up from his phone and I spread my designs across his glass coffee table. Page after page of carefully drawn clothing pieces, detailed notes about sustainable materials, business plans I'd been researching for months. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst. For a moment, he just stared. Then, he started laughing. Not a gentle chuckle or an amused smile. I'm talking about full-body, doubled-over laughter that echoed through his pristine apartment and made my blood run cold. "Jenny," he said, wiping tears from his eyes, This is adorable. Really. But come on, be serious for a minute." I felt my face burn with embarrassment, but I pushed forward. "I am being serious. I've been researching this for months. The sustainable fashion market is growing and..." "Sustainable fashion!" He picked up one of my sketches, holding it like it was contaminated. "Sweetheart, you work as a receptionist. You can barely afford your rent. Do you have any idea how much money it takes to start a clothing line? We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, connections in the industry, years of experience." Each word felt like a slap. "I know it won't be easy, but..." "Easy?" He stood up, pacing now. "Jenny, it's not about easy or hard. It's about reality. You're a nice girl with a creative hobby, and that's great. But this?" He gestured at my sketches dismissively. "This is fantasy. You need to grow up and focus on building a real career, not chasing some impossible dream." I gathered my sketches with trembling hands, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall in front of him. "So you don't believe in me at all?" Marcus softened his voice, but somehow that made it worse. "I believe in being practical. I believe in building a stable life together. But this fashion thing? Jenny, I've seen enough people waste years chasing dreams that never happen. I don't want that for you. I don't want that for us. That night, I cried harder than I had since I was a child, not just because of his words, but because of how small he made me feel, how foolish, how naive. But you know what? Sometimes the people who try to clip your wings are the ones who teach you how to fly. Looking back, that was only the beginning. After that night, something shifted between Marcus and me. He started treating my fashion phase like it was some kind of cute quirk that I'd eventually outgrow. Whenever I mentioned anything about design or sustainability, he'd get this patronising smile and change the subject. "Jenny's got her little art project," he'd say to his friends at dinner parties, ruffling my hair like I was a child. "She's very creative." The worst part? I started believing him. For weeks, I barely touched my sketchbook. I'd come home from work, look at my designs scattered across my desk, and hear his voice in my head. "Be realistic, Jenny. Focus on building a real career." So I did what he suggested. I started applying for real jobs. Administrative positions, office work, anything that would make me look more serious and grown up in his eyes. I even threw away some of my fabric samples, telling myself I was being practical. But late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd find myself sketching again. It was like my hands had a mind of their own, drawing designs that felt more real to me than anything else in my life. I'd catch myself researching organic cotton suppliers, or reading about innovative dyeing techniques that used less water. The passion was still there, burning quietly beneath the surface. Marcus noticed, of course. "You're still doing this fashion thing," he said one evening, finding me with my laptop open to a web page about sustainable textile manufacturing. "I'm just learning," I said weakly. "Learning about what? A career that doesn't exist for someone like you?" He sat beside me, his voice gentle but firm. "Jenny, I love you, but you need to let this go. It's becoming an obsession, and it's not healthy." That word, obsession, hit me like a physical blow. Was I obsessed? Was I delusional? Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe I was just a receptionist with unrealistic dreams. But then something happened that changed everything. I was walking through downtown on my lunch break, lost in thought, when I passed a small boutique I'd never noticed before. The window display stopped me cold. There, beautifully arranged, were clothes that looked exactly like what I'd been designing. Flowing, elegant pieces in natural fabrics, with price tags that made my eyes water. I pushed open the door and a bell chimed softly. The owner, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes, looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you?" she asked. "These clothes," I said, gesturing around the shop, "they're beautiful. Are they locally made?" Her face lit up. "Most of them, yes. I work with several local designers who focus on sustainable practices. It's a small but growing market." Growing? I felt my heart start to race. "Oh, yes. More and more people are becoming conscious about where their clothes come from, how they're made. Fast fashion is losing its appeal, especially among younger consumers." She studied my face. "Are you interested in fashion?" I almost said no, almost gave her the standard response I'd been trained to give. "Oh, I just appreciate good design." But something in her expression made me honest. I design clothes, or I used to. I'm not sure anymore." "What kind of designs?" Before I could stop myself, I was telling her everything. About my vision for sustainable fashion, about the sketches I'd been working on, about how I wanted to create pieces that would last forever. She listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she understood what I was talking about. "Do you have any of your designs with you?" she asked. I did. I always carried a few sketches in my bag, even though I'd been trying to stop. With trembling hands, I pulled out 3 of my favourites. She studied them carefully, and I watched her face change. "These are exceptional," she said finally. "The attention to detail, the way you've thought about construction and fit. Have you had formal training?" "No," I admitted. "I'm self-taught. I see how clothes should be made." "That's a gift," she said simply. "A rare one." We talked for another 20 minutes. She told me about the challenges of sustainable fashion, but also about the opportunities, about customers who are willing to pay more for quality and ethics, about the growing movement of conscious consumers who wanted to make better choices. When I left that shop, I felt like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally breathe again. My dream wasn't naive or unrealistic. It was real. It was happening. And there were people out there who understood it. That night, I called Marcus, practically buzzing with excitement. "You won't believe what happened today," I said, launching into the story of the boutique and the owner's encouragement. There was a long pause. "Jenny," he said, his voice tight, "we've talked about this. You can't let one person's opinion send you back down this path. Of course, a shop owner is going to encourage you. She probably wants to sell you something. But, Marcus..." "No, Jenny, I'm serious. This fantasy is affecting our relationship. You're obsessing over something that's never going to happen instead of focusing on us, on building a real future together." I felt the familiar shame creeping in, but this time there was something else too. A small, defiant voice that whispered, "But what if he's wrong?" "I think," Marcus continued, "it's time you made a choice. This fashion thing, or our relationship, because I can't keep watching you chase something that's only going to disappoint you." The line went quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. "You're asking me to choose between my dreams and you?" I said finally. "I'm asking you to choose between fantasy and reality, between what could actually make you happy and what's just going to break your heart." That night, I stared at the ceiling until dawn, Marcus's ultimatum echoing in my mind. Choose him, or choose a dream that might never come true. But I didn't know what was coming next. The next few weeks felt like living in slow motion. Marcus was distant, clearly waiting for me to make my choice. I tried to focus on our relationship. I really did. I went to his work events, smiled at his colleagues, played the part of the supportive girlfriend who had finally come to her senses. But every time I looked at my abandoned sketches, I felt a piece of myself dying. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March. I remember because it was raining, and I'd gotten soaked walking from the bus stop to Marcus' apartment. He'd invited me over for dinner, and I thought maybe it was his way of trying to reconnect, to get back to where we used to be. I was wrong. When I walked in, Marcus was sitting at his dining table with papers spread out in front of him. He looked up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Perfect timing," he said. "I wanted to talk to you about something." I sat down, water still dripping from my hair, and looked at what he'd been working on. Real estate listings. Expensive ones. "I've been thinking about our future," he said, his voice taking on that tone he used when he was about to make a presentation at work. "I'm ready to take the next step. I want us to move in together." My heart should have leaped. 6 months ago it would have, but all I felt was a cold dread settling in my stomach. "These are some places I've been looking at," he continued, sliding photos across the table. 2-bedroom condos in the financial district, close to my office, great investment potential. We could build real equity together. I stared at the pictures. Gleaming countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of place that looked like it had never seen a creative mess or a late-night passion project. "What do you think?" he asked. "They're nice," I said slowly. "But, Marcus, I can't afford rent on places like these. My receptionist salary..." "That's the other thing I wanted to discuss." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I've been talking to some people at my firm. There's an opening in our administrative department. Better pay, real benefits, a clear career path. It's perfect for you." I felt like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. "You got me a job? I got you an opportunity. A real one. Not some pipe dream, but actual career advancement." He reached across the table and took my hand. "This is it, Jenny. This is us building something real together. A life, a future, the kind of stability that actually matters." I looked down at our joined hands, at the real estate listings, at the life he'd planned out for me without asking what I wanted. "What about my designs?" I asked quietly. His face hardened. "What about them? I mean, could I still work on them? As a hobby? Jenny?" He said my name like he was talking to a stubborn child. "We've been over this. You need to let go of this fantasy. It's time to grow up." Something inside me snapped. Not dramatically, more like a cable that had been fraying for months, finally giving way. "What if it's not fantasy?" I said, pulling my hand away. "What? What if you're wrong? What if I actually could build a sustainable fashion brand? What if I could make it work? Marcus's expression shifted from frustrated to genuinely angry. Jenny, stop. Just stop. Do you have any idea how ridiculous you sound? You're a receptionist with no experience, no connections, no money. You think you're going to compete with established fashion houses? You think you're going to revolutionize an entire industry? Maybe I am, I said, standing up. Maybe I'm exactly the kind of person who could do something like that. You're delusional. He stood too, his voice rising. You're living in a fantasy world, and I'm sick of pretending it's cute or harmless. It's not. It's pathetic. The word hung in the air between us like a slap. Pathetic, I repeated. Yes, pathetic. And if you can't see that, if you can't choose reality over this obsession, then maybe we don't have a future after all. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw someone I didn't recognize. Or maybe I saw someone I'd been refusing to see all along. Someone who needed me to stay small so he could feel big. Someone who was so afraid of taking risks that he couldn't understand anyone who would dare to dream. You're right, I said quietly. His face relaxed, thinking he'd won. Good. I am glad you're finally... We don't have a future. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the rain against the windows, the hum of his expensive appliances, the sound of my own heart breaking. Not for him, but for the time I'd wasted doubting myself. Jenny, he said, his voice softer now, don't be dramatic. You're upset, but I'm not upset, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. I'm disappointed. In you, but mostly in myself for listening to you for so long. I walked to the table and gathered up my sketches. The ones I'd been too afraid to leave at home, the ones I'd been carrying around like secret prayers. You want to know what's pathetic, Marcus? What's pathetic is being so afraid of failure that you never even try. What's pathetic is being with someone who dreams big and trying to make them dream smaller so you don't have to feel bad about settling. Jenny, I'm going to build my fashion line, I said, heading for the door. I'm going to make it work. And someday, when you see my name on a label or in a magazine, you're going to remember this conversation and realize that you were wrong. About me, about dreams, about everything. I was halfway to the door when he called out, "You'll be back. When reality hits, when you realize you can't do this alone, you'll come back." I turned around one last time. "No, Marcus, I won't, because I'm already not alone. I have something you'll never understand. I have faith in myself." And with that, I walked out into the rain, my sketches clutched to my chest, my heart pounding with terror and exhilaration. I didn't know it then, but that was the last time I would ever doubt my dreams. Looking back, that was only the beginning of the real story. The weeks after leaving Marcus were the hardest and most liberating of my life. I felt like I was learning to breathe again, but I was also terrified. What if he was right? What if I was just a delusional receptionist with pretty sketches and impossible dreams? But you know what? Sometimes you have to jump off the cliff to learn you can fly. I threw myself into my designs with an intensity that surprised even me. Every morning before work, every lunch break, every evening until my eyes burned, I was sketching, researching, planning. I turned my tiny studio apartment into a war room, with fabric samples pinned to the walls and business plans scattered across every surface. The first real breakthrough came when I remembered the boutique owner Sarah, who had been so encouraging. I gathered my courage and went back to her shop on a Saturday afternoon. "I remember you," she said with a warm smile. "The designer with the beautiful sketches. How are you doing?" I'm trying to figure out how to make this real," I admitted. What happened next changed everything. Sarah didn't just give me encouragement, she gave me practical advice. She told me about local fabric suppliers, about small-scale manufacturers who worked with independent designers, about trade shows and markets where I could start selling. But most importantly, she said, you need to start small. Pick 3 designs, your absolute strongest pieces, and focus on making them perfect. Don't try to launch a full collection right away. Build your reputation piece by piece. I spent the next month perfecting 3 designs, a classic blazer in organic cotton, a flowing dress in sustainable bamboo fibre, and a versatile jacket that could be worn 4 different ways. I used every penny of my savings to have 5 pieces of each design made by a small, ethical manufacturer Sarah recommended. The first time I held one of my actual pieces, not just a sketch, but a real garment I had designed, I cried. It was perfect, better than perfect. It was proof that my dreams weren't just dreams. Sarah agreed to carry my pieces in her boutique on consignment. "Let's see how they do," she said. "But, Jenny, I have a good feeling about this." The first piece sold within a week. Then another. I'll never forget the day Sarah called me at work. "Jenny," she said, her voice excited, "I need to reorder. Everything you gave me has sold, and I have customers asking for more." I almost dropped the phone. Everything? Everything. And not just that. I've had 3 other boutique owners come in asking about your designs. Word is spreading. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the empty spaces where my fabric samples used to be, where my sketches had been scattered. My phone buzzed with text messages from potential customers, emails from other small shops interested in carrying my pieces. For the first time in months, I let myself believe. Really believe. But success brought new challenges. I was still working full-time as a receptionist, trying to design and manage a growing business in my spare time. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and running on maybe 4 hours of sleep a night. That's when I made the scariest decision of my life. I quit my job. My boss thought I was having a breakdown. "Jenny, you're giving up a steady paycheck to..." "What? Make clothes?" "To build a business," I corrected. "To build a dream." The first 6 months of working full-time on my brand were brutal. Some days I made enough to cover my rent and groceries. Other days I made nothing. I ate a lot of ramen and learned to be creative with leftovers. But I was building something. Something real, something mine. I called my brand Rooted. Clothing that was rooted in sustainability, in quality, in the belief that fashion could be both beautiful and ethical. I started an Instagram account, sharing not just my designs, but the story behind them, the process of creating each piece, the journey from sketch to finished garment. People responded, not just to the clothes, but to the story, to the authenticity, to the idea that someone could start from nothing and build something meaningful. My following grew slowly but steadily. 10 followers became 100, then 1,000. Orders started coming in from across the country. Fashion bloggers began featuring my pieces. I was profiled in a local newspaper as a rising star in sustainable fashion. And then, exactly 1 year after I walked out of Marcus's apartment, something incredible happened. I was featured in a major fashion magazine. The article was titled "The New Guard: 5 Independent Designers Changing Fashion's Future." My blazer was on the cover, worn by a model standing in a field of organic cotton. Inside, there was a full-page spread of my designs and a profile that talked about my journey from receptionist to sustainable fashion entrepreneur. I bought 10 copies of the magazine. I called my parents, I called Sarah, I even called some friends I hadn't spoken to in months. I was so proud I could barely contain myself. But the best part, the validation that I'd been right all along, that my dreams weren't naive or unrealistic, that the girl who had been called pathetic for believing in herself had built something extraordinary. I was sitting in my apartment that evening, the magazine spread out in front of me, when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Jenny? It's Marcus?" My blood turned to ice. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year, hadn't thought about him in months. Hearing his voice felt like being transported back to a person I used to be. "Marcus," I said carefully, "what do you want?" "I saw the magazine article," he said. Wow, I can't believe it. You actually did it." I didn't respond. I was too busy trying to process the fact that he was calling me, that he had seen my success, that he was acknowledging what I'd accomplished. "I was wrong," he continued. "I was completely wrong about you, about your dreams. What you've built is incredible." Still silence from me. "I miss you," he said softly. "I miss us. I've been thinking about calling you for months, but I didn't know what to say. But seeing this article. Jenny, I'm so proud of you. And I was wondering if maybe we could talk, maybe get dinner and catch up. That's when I found my voice. No, I said simply. No? He sounded genuinely surprised. But Jenny, I just said I was wrong. You were wrong, I agreed. You were wrong about me, about my dreams, about what I was capable of. But you know what you were right about? What? We don't have a future. I could hear him processing this. Jenny, I understand you're angry. I'm not angry, Marcus. I'm grateful. You taught me something incredibly valuable. What's that? You taught me that I should never, ever trust someone who tries to make me smaller. You taught me that the people who really love me will believe in my dreams even when they seem impossible. You taught me that I don't need anyone's permission to chase what makes me happy. But, Jenny, I have to go, I said. I have a business to run, dreams to chase, a life to live that's bigger than you ever imagined I could handle. I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my apartment, surrounded by fabric samples and sketches and the magazine that proved I'd been right all along. And I smiled, because I realized that the best revenge isn't anger or bitterness. The best revenge is building a life so beautiful that the people who doubted you can't help but see what they missed. But that phone call was just the beginning of Marcus's attempts to get back into my life. You'd think one rejection would be enough, wouldn't you? But Marcus had never been the type to give up easily, at least not when it came to things he suddenly decided he wanted. Over the next few months, as my brand continued to grow, his attempts to reconnect became more persistent. It started with text. Saw your piece in Vogue online, incredible work. Thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. Would love to catch up over coffee. No pressure. I ignored them all. Then came the flowers. Expensive arrangements delivered to my apartment with notes like, proud of everything you've accomplished, and would love to celebrate your success with you. I gave them to my elderly neighbour, Mrs. Chen, who was delighted and asked no questions about why I was getting rid of such beautiful bouquets. But Marcus's most pathetic attempt came 6 months later at a fashion industry event where I was being honoured as Young Entrepreneur of the Year. I was standing near the bar, talking to a journalist who wanted to feature rooted in an upcoming sustainability article, when I felt someone tap my shoulder. Excuse me, a familiar voice said. Could I steal Jenny for just a moment? I turned around, and there was Marcus, looking exactly the same as always. Expensive suit, perfect hair, that confident smile that used to make my heart race. Now, it just made me tired. Marcus, I said evenly, what are you doing here? I bought a ticket, he said, as if that explained everything. I wanted to see you accept your award, to support you. The journalist I'd been talking to looked between us curiously. I'll let you two catch up, she said diplomatically, stepping away. You can't just show up at my professional events, I said, keeping my voice low. I know. But Jenny, you won't return my calls or texts. I didn't know how else to reach you. Maybe that should tell you something. He had the grace to look embarrassed. I deserve that. I know I do. But please, just give me 5 minutes. Let me explain. I looked around the room, at the fashion industry professionals, at the other entrepreneurs being honoured, at the life I'd built for myself. A life where I belonged, where I was respected, where my dreams weren't just tolerated, but celebrated. 5 minutes, I said. Then you leave. We stepped onto a quiet balcony overlooking the city. Marcus leaned against the railing, looking out at the lights below. I've been miserable, he said without preamble. Ever since you left, I've been completely miserable. I am sorry to hear that. Are you? Because you seem like you've never been happier. I considered this. I haven't been. I've never been this happy. He flinched. Right, of course. You're living your dream. You're everything you said you'd become. And I was an idiot. The biggest idiot in the world. I let the most incredible woman I've ever known walk away because I was scared. Scared of what? Of you being braver than me? Of you having bigger dreams than I did? of you succeeding and making me look like the small, petty person I was. I'd expected him to make excuses, to try to rationalize his behavior. I hadn't expected this level of honesty. So what do you want, Marcus? I want another chance. I want to be the man who supports your dreams instead of crushing them. I want to be worthy of someone as incredible as you. And you think showing up at my professional events is the way to do that. I think grand gestures are the only way to show you how serious I am about this. About us. I turned to face him fully. There is no us, Marcus. There hasn't been for almost 2 years. But there could be. Jenny, I've changed. I've learned. I know what I lost, and I know what I need to do to get it back. What you need to do, I said carefully, is move on. Just like I did. You're seeing someone else. The pain in his voice was real. That's not your business. But no, I'm not seeing anyone else. I'm too busy building the life you told me was impossible. Then there's still hope. No, Marcus, there isn't. He was quiet for a long moment. Can I ask you something? You've got about 30 seconds left. Do you hate me? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I said finally. I don't hate you. I'm grateful to you. Grateful. You showed me who I didn't want to be with. You showed me what it feels like to have someone try to make me smaller, so now I know to never accept that again. You taught me that I'm strong enough to choose myself, even when it's scary. So this is really it. There's no chance you'd ever consider. Marcus, I interrupted gently, I need you to understand something. The woman who loved you, who needed your approval, who would have given up her dreams to keep you happy, that woman doesn't exist anymore. She died the night I walked out of your apartment. The woman standing here now would never be with someone who took 2 years to realize her dreams were valid. He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. You're completely different. I mean, completely myself. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly who I was always meant to be. And there's no room in that life for me. There's room for people who believed in me when I was nobody. There's room for people who celebrate my success without needing to be convinced of my worth. There's room for people who see my dreams as assets, not obstacles. I could be that person now. Maybe you could. But I'll never know, because I'll never risk finding out. I have too much to lose now. The 5 minutes were up. I started to walk back inside, but Marcus called my name one more time. Jenny? I turned back. I really am proud of you, even if you never want to see me again. I need you to know that. What you've built is extraordinary. Thank you, I said. But your pride doesn't mean anything to me anymore. The only approval I need is my own. And I walked back into the party, leaving him standing alone on the balcony, finally understanding what he had lost. But even after that night, Marcus didn't give up entirely. His attempts became more desperate, more public, more embarrassing. The last straw came 8 months later at New York Fashion Week. I still can't believe I'm saying this, but I was at New York Fashion Week. Me, the girl who used to sketch in her tiny apartment while eating ramen. Rooted had been invited to participate in a sustainable fashion showcase, and I was sitting in the front row, watching models walk down the runway in clothes I had designed. It was surreal. Photographers were snapping pictures, fashion editors were taking notes, and buyers were already approaching me about placing orders. This was everything I had dreamed of and more. The show had just ended, and I was backstage with my team, buzzing with excitement and adrenaline when someone handed me a bouquet of roses. "These are for you," the backstage coordinator said, "from an admirer." I opened the card and my heart sank. Jenny, you're absolutely radiant. Watching you succeed has been the greatest privilege of my life. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm hoping you'll give me one more chance to prove I can be the man you deserve. All my love, Marcus. I looked around, scanning the crowd of fashion industry professionals, models, and press. And there he was, standing near the exit, looking completely out of place in his finance bro suit among all the creatively dressed fashion people. He was holding a sign, an actual sign that read, "Jenny, I believe in your dreams now. Please forgive me. I wanted to disappear. This was my moment, my triumph, and he was turning it into some kind of romantic comedy spectacle. Friend of yours? Asked Maya, my assistant, following my gaze. Ex-boyfriend, I muttered. Excuse me for a minute. I marched over to Marcus, my jaw tight with anger. Are you out of your mind? I had to do something dramatic, he said, lowering the sign. You won't talk to me any other way. I'm at a professional event, Marcus. This is my career. You can't just show up with a sign like some kind of stalker. I'm not stalking you. I'm trying to win you back. By embarrassing me in front of my colleagues. By making a scene at the most important professional moment of my life. I thought you'd find it romantic. Romantic? I stared at him in disbelief. You think crashing my Fashion Week debut with a poster board is romantic? I was trying to show you how much I care, how much I've changed. You want to show me how much you've changed? Then respect my boundaries. Show me by leaving me alone. People were starting to stare. I could see photographers turning their cameras toward us, fashion editors whispering to each other. This was supposed to be my moment of triumph, and Marcus was turning it into a spectacle. Jenny, please, just hear me out. No. My voice was louder than I intended, and several people nearby turned to look. Marcus, this stops now. Tonight. You will not contact me again. You will not show up at my events. You will not send flowers or gifts or signs or any other ridiculous gesture. But I love you. You love the idea of me. You love the successful version of me that you never believed could exist. But you know what? That version of me exists because I learned to stop caring about what you think. He looked genuinely confused. I don't understand. I'm telling you I was wrong. I'm trying to support your dreams now. Marcus, do you remember what you said to me that night I left? You said I was pathetic. You said my dreams were a fantasy. You said I needed to grow up. I was wrong about all of that. You were. But do you know what the worst part was? It wasn't that you didn't believe in me. It was that you made me not believe in myself. For months, I questioned everything because someone I loved told me I was delusional for having dreams. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't undo the damage. Sorry doesn't give me back the months I spent doubting myself. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you only support my dreams now because they've been validated by other people. I could feel tears threatening, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of him, not at my moment of triumph. I need you to understand something, I continued. The woman you fell in love with was small and uncertain and needed your approval. The woman standing here now is strong and successful and doesn't need anyone's permission to chase her dreams. You can't have it both ways, Marcus. You can't crush someone's spirit and then want them back when they prove you wrong. So that's it? There's really no chance for us? There was never a chance for us. Not after what you did. Not after what you said. Because even if I forgave you, even if I took you back, I would always know that you only believed in me after the world told you to. Marcus looked around at the Fashion Week crowd, at the photographers, at the undeniable proof of my success. I made the biggest mistake of my life, he said quietly. Yes, you did. But you know what? It was the best thing that ever happened to me. And with that, I walked away from him for the final time, leaving him standing there with his pathetic sign, finally understanding that some things can't be undone, some words can't be taken back, and some dreams are too big for small-minded people to comprehend. But this story isn't over yet, because the real victory wasn't just proving Marcus wrong, it was what happened next. 3 months after Fashion Week, I was sitting in my new office. Yes, I had an office now, in a converted warehouse in the Arts District, when my phone rang. It was Sarah from the boutique where I'd first started selling my pieces. Jenny, you need to see this, she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. Turn on Channel 7 News. Right now. I grabbed the remote and flipped to the local news station. And there it was, a segment about local success stories, featuring a 5-minute piece about my journey from receptionist to sustainable fashion entrepreneur. They interviewed me in my studio. surrounded by my latest designs. They talked about how Rooted had grown from a 3-piece collection to a full fashion line carried in over 50 boutiques nationwide. They showed clips from my Fashion Week show, quotes from fashion magazine profiles, testimonials from customers who loved the quality and ethics of my pieces. But the best part? They interviewed Marcus. I almost choked on my coffee when his face appeared on screen. He looked tired, older somehow, sitting in what I recognised as his old apartment. "Marcus Williams, you dated Jenny Chen before she started her fashion line," the reporter said. "What was she like back then?" She was always creative," Marcus said carefully. "Always sketching, always dreaming up new designs. Did you think she'd achieve this level of success?" There was a long pause. Marcus looked directly into the camera, and I could see something broken in his eyes. "I didn't believe in her the way I should have," he said finally. "I thought her dreams were too big, too unrealistic. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things." "Do you regret not being more supportive?" "Every day," he said simply. "Every single day." The segment ended with footage of my latest collection, and the reporter noting that Rooted was projected to hit $2 million in revenue within the next year. $2 million. From sketches in a tiny apartment to a multi-million-dollar business. I sat in my office, surrounded by the dreams I'd refused to let die, and felt a satisfaction deeper than any I'd ever experienced. But the real vindication came a week later, when I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. Marcus was getting married. The invitation was elaborate, expensive, the kind of thing that screamed, "Look how successful and happy I am." His fiancée was a lawyer, successful, conventional, exactly the kind of woman who would never embarrass him with unrealistic dreams. There was a handwritten note inside. "Jenny, I know this might seem strange, but I wanted you to know. I found someone who fits into my life the way I always wanted you to. I hope you can be happy for me. Marcus." I stared at that note for a long time, trying to figure out what I felt. Anger, hurt, jealousy, none of those things. What I felt was pity, because Marcus had learned nothing. He'd found another woman who would make herself smaller to fit into his narrow vision of what life should look like. He'd found someone who wouldn't challenge him, wouldn't force him to grow, wouldn't make him question his safe, predictable existence. And he thought that was a victory. I called Maya into my office. "I need you to send an RSVP to this wedding," I said, handing her the invitation. "Are you going?" she asked, surprised. "Absolutely not, but I want to send a gift." "What kind of gift?" I smiled. "It's something perfect." The gift I sent was a piece from my latest collection, a stunning blazer in sustainable silk, with a note that read, "Congratulations on your wedding. I hope your new wife never has to choose between her dreams and your approval. Jenny." I found out later that Marcus's fiancée loved the blazer. She wore it to their engagement party and told everyone it was from that amazing, sustainable fashion designer from the news. She had no idea her husband-to-be had once told that designer her dreams were pathetic. But the sweetest victory of all came 6 months later, when I received a call from a major fashion house in Milan. "Miss Chen," the voice said in accented English, "we've been following your work with great interest. We'd like to discuss a potential partnership." A partnership with one of the most prestigious fashion houses in the world. They wanted to create a sustainable line using my designs, my vision, my expertise. I hung up the phone and sat in my office, looking out at the city where I'd once been told my dreams were too big. Now, those dreams were taking me to Milan, to Paris, to fashion capitals around the world. That night, I treated myself to dinner at the fanciest restaurant in the city. I sat alone at a table for one, dressed in a beautiful piece from my own collection, and raised a glass of champagne to myself. "To never looking back," I said aloud, not caring if anyone heard me. And I meant it. Because the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's building a life so extraordinary that their opinion becomes completely irrelevant. 2 years later, I was standing in my flagship store in Soho, watching customers browse through racks of clothing that had started as sketches in a tiny apartment. Rooted had become everything I dreamed and more. A globally recognized brand, a symbol of sustainable fashion, a testament to the power of believing in yourself when no one else will. I was adjusting a display when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Excuse me? Do you work here?" I turned around to find a young woman, maybe 22, holding one of my blazers with trembling hands. "I do," I said with a smile. "I'm actually the owner, Jenny Chen." Her eyes widened. "You're Jenny Chen? I've read every article about you. You're the reason I started my own jewelry line." "Tell me about it," I said, genuinely interested. She launched into her story, how she'd been working at a coffee shop, sketching jewelry designs in her spare time, how her boyfriend had told her she was wasting her time, how she'd finally decided to believe in herself instead of listening to people who wanted to make her smaller. "I just sold my first piece last week," she said, her voice bright with excitement. "It's not much, but it's a start." "It's everything," I told her. "That first sale is everything." As she left the store, blazer in hand and dreams in her eyes, I thought about how many young women had told me similar stories. How many had found the courage to chase their dreams because I'd shared my story, because I'd proven that it was possible to rise from nothing and build something extraordinary. That night, I was closing up the store when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Jenny, I saw you on the cover of Forbes. I'm proud of you. I hope you're happy. Marcus." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Some chapters of your life are meant to stay closed. Instead, I walked out into the New York evening, past the boutiques and galleries, past the dreamers and builders, past all the people who were brave enough to believe in something bigger than themselves. I thought about that scared 22-year-old girl who had once sat in her tiny apartment, sketching designs and wondering if she was crazy to dream so big. I thought about the night I'd walked out of Marcus's apartment, clutching my sketches and my determination. And I smiled, because I realized something beautiful. The dreams that feel impossible are usually the ones most worth chasing. As I walked home through the city that had once seemed too big for a girl like me, I whispered a promise to that younger version of myself. We did it. We built something beautiful, and we never looked back. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is simply becoming everything you were told you could never be. And sometimes that's exactly enough.